Hello everyone, that's not the right way. Thanks for coming along to this, the Engaging Kids with the Wonder of Science panel. For the next hour or so we're going to have a little bit of a chat about what we might be doing right or wrong as a society and as individuals, I guess, about getting kids to engage with science and thinking critically, which is either the right time to be doing it or the worst time ever, since clearly we've all had enough of experts. We'll do Q&A kind of as we go, really. If you've seen any of the stuff I produce normally, there's no order or system to anything. So I'm Trent Burton, if you don't know me, one of the co-directors of Trunkman. We make Cosmic Genome, Book Shambles, Quest for Wonder. We work with Infinite Monkey Cage and all that sort of stuff. And Quest for Wonder is actually screening at 3 o'clock next door, if you haven't seen it. And we have Dr Karl, who is a science writer, speaker, broadcaster, probably responsible for everyone in Australia enjoying science at some point, me definitely included. We have, in no particular order, Matt down the end, who you'll probably recognise from the other room. You'll know him from...
big fans of competent hosting, it turns out.
Oh, this is the slickest thing I've done in years. Number 5, Festival of the Spoken Nerd, and he also used to be a maths teacher.
Correct, yes. That's not the normal response.
Yeah, it is a special crowd. Ginny Smith is a science communicator for Naked Scientists and Cambridge TV, and she tours around schools and science festivals talking to kids and adults mainly about the brain. And Sally LePage is the host of Shed Science, a YouTube series that explores biology from the comfort of a garden shed. And she also volunteers at the Oxford Museum of Natural History and is doing her PhD in evolutionary biology right now. So to start, I just want to start with a little story. When I was in year 9, I think it was, first day of science in year 9, my teacher walked in and said, "Let me make things very clear, I'm a facilitator, not a teacher." So that was a great start. And we were learning something about the planets. I can't remember what. One of my friends asked a question about something. It was about the moons of Jupiter or something. And the teacher said, "Don't worry, you don't need to know that. It's not in the test." And she said, "I know, I'm just curious." And he said, "Well, we haven't got time for that." And moved straight on, which is kind of what I've been trying to counter ever since with stuff like Quest for Wonder and just trying to get kids to care about science to begin with. And I want to start with you, Matt, because maths is probably stereotypically the one that most kids go, "I hate maths, maths is boring." And you go around to schools, school groups, Maths Jam, trying to make maths interesting for kids. How do you... We've just been recording Matt's audiobook, actually, and
Yes.
He's been going on about how he finds numbers fun and trying to make just the concept of maths fun.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I know a lot of people here will already... Not everyone, though. A lot of people will be on side already on maths being interesting, and I can go on and on about this, and if you want to see me at any point, I will. But specifically... because I used to be a regular high school maths teacher, I now I try to average about one school a week during term time, so about 30, 35 schools a year. But I have the freedom to go in and not have to do anything based on the curriculum. I have the shock and awe of never underestimate the power of novelty to get adolescents to pay attention for up to an hour, and I don't have to do any follow-on repercussions, long-term behavior management that works, right? And so I can go in and do all the things I wish I could have done when I was a maths teacher. And so a lot of it is showing the students the maths that they're learning where it ends up being useful. And a lot of it is showing them maths beyond what they're learning at school. And so I lump them together as enrichment. This is useful. This is just innately interesting. But then I get to go away again. And so I think a big part of it is going in, doing that in a way that when they go back to their lessons, they're not just like, well, why aren't the lessons like what we had there, right? And so a really important part, I mean, this is slightly off what you're asking, for people who go into schools and do stuff like that, is afterwards the students have to think higher of their maths teacher than they did before I showed up. And so that's a big bit of what I do. And I mean, the problem then is I think we're short on enthusiastic maths teachers. And so I mean, I would love to be out of a job because schools can do this themselves. But until anyone who's got a maths degree isn't making a conscious reduction in the earnings they could make, because there's a few fairly profitable things you can do with a maths degree. And so because our current system of maths education relies on people opting out of the salary they could earn to become a teacher out of some kind of sense of civic duty, that's not a sustainable business model, and we are understaffed because of it. And so that's, I can pretty much just leave now. That's my bit for the
thank
panel.
you very much, ma'am. How do you find, Ginny, when you go into schools and you've got your specific shows that you know when you walk into that room there's going to be half of those kids that do not care, no matter how amazing your show is, they just don't care about science for whatever reason. Is that something we need to address, or do we just accept that as fact?
I mean, I think what you said about novelty is very, very true. I think we have it very easy compared to teachers because, you know, they're out of their lesson, they're in the big hall, it's kind of exciting. There are always some people who you can tell from the beginning are going to be the kind of slightly difficult ones to get on side, but if you can get them on side, then everyone's in, because they're kind of like the ringleaders, I guess. I try and always start with something that's going to make people sort of go, oh, I wasn't expecting that, kind of something that's going to bring them in, whether that's a really cool illusion, because as you say, I talk about the brain a lot, and the great thing about my topic is everyone has a brain, so it's kind
Arguably.
of automatically relevant to everyone. So doing something that kind of really gets that kind of like, oh, what's that? I was in the magic panel earlier, and it's that kind of that moment of awe or kind of confusion of like, how did you do that you can play on as a science communicator, and that I find is a really good way to kind of get people on board.
Is there a problem, Sally, you might be best positioned to answer this, where we have, as Matt said, there's science in the classroom that is the boring science I have to learn, and then if kids come to Natural History Museum or something where it's like, oh, this is the fun science, I'm allowed to enjoy this, but I'm not allowed to enjoy the stuff in the classroom?
So when I'm working in museums, I'm mostly working with quite a young age of kids. So somewhere between kind of the 4 to 12 age. So at that point, they're just like, oh my God, my teacher told me about this in school. I get to show off now. And they tell me everything they know about dinosaurs, which is a lot more than I know about dinosaurs. And so at that age still, I think as well, because the sciences haven't been so broken up like they do later on in schools, they're just like, oh, I get to show this off to my class, and it's all still part of learning and just exploring the world. I think as you then get older, there is more of a sense, because I also do a lot of YouTube, people will watch YouTube videos and be like, oh, why can't my science lessons be like this? Or I wish I had Sally as my biology teacher. And I do think that part of it is just the school curriculums can't be as broad as they can be. When I was doing biology, it was 99% human physiology, which doesn't interest me. And it's just a shame that in schools there does have to be some sort of curriculum system. You can't just say, right, teachers, run wild, do whatever you have to do, as much as I'm sure Matt would love that to be the case. It's just not feasible, and so yeah, it is quite difficult to try to bridge that, and I think it is very much more of a problem later on than it is earlier on.
Is it that there's no necessarily synergy, which is an awful word but I'm using it, across the subjects? Like we do biology, we do chemistry, there's no teaching of science or critical thinking or anything. We were talking on the train on the way up this morning about how getting kids to think critically, it's not just for passing the test. There's stuff like climate change, that being able to realise what you're being told is correct or bullshit really matters.
Well, what's the exact question again?
That if we're teaching kids the way to correctly analyse data or understand what they're reading, it's not just to pass a test. This actually matters to their future as humans on this planet.
That is so deep on so many levels. I don't know where to start. With regard to critical thinking, people pick that up along the way, beginning with relationships and friends, And some people never realise some of the basic truths in life. Like one of the basic truths is that in public buildings the toilets are near the elevators usually, and some people never pick that up in their whole life. And in human relationships, some people never pick up that 3 in a relationship is an unstable number, and 2 will pick on the third eventually. And so the whole concept of critical thinking goes right across human relationships. And some people keep on making the same mistakes over and over again, into scientific thinking, into political thinking, into career decisions. I had my amazing insight into critical thinking when I was about 14 and I was mowing the lawn. Do people mow the lawn in the United Kingdom? Is there such a thing? With a Victor lawn mower? A rotary, okay, you've got a machine powered by petrol or gasoline, as the Americans foppishly call it. Okay, so I was mowing the lawn, and across the road was this human adult who was a family man and with children. And suddenly there was this terrible loud clattering noise, and he'd run across some coat hanger wire, which is incredibly strong, but that's another story. And so he stopped the machine stopped, and he pulled the coat hanger wire out, and then threw it into the grass ahead of him. And I was 13 years old, and I just had to stop and look, and sure enough he ran across it a little while later, and then when the motor had come to a halt, he then took it off and threw it into the grass ahead of him. And he was a man who was supposedly a family man with responsibilities for his many Catholic children. And that left me totally confused about critical thinking, except I knew that he didn't have it, and I had something, but I didn't know what it was. But how do you pass that on to somebody? I have no idea. Apart from telling him, don't throw the coat hanger wire into the grass. So, you guys got any idea?
Well, it's quite interesting actually, because I know when I was at school in history we had to talk about how you read sources and whether you relied on a source as a good source and was it a primary source or a secondary source. But I don't remember doing anything like that in science. But actually that's something I do all the time now. So I'm writing a book at the moment about food.
Your second book.
For DK Publishing, it'll be out sometime next year. Put that out of the way. So we're writing about diets and health and what is a carb and should we be worried about them, all of those sorts of things. And most of my time is spent Googling things, reading sources and going, is this something I can rely on and use the information from, or is this complete bullshit? And you'd be surprised how difficult it is to tell sometimes. And that is a skill that, with the internet becoming more and more important, I think we really need to be teaching, not just children, but adults as well.
Is it a case of, when we look at something like art or whatever, people go, you can do art for art's sake, it's fun, watch a movie, it's fun. But especially in primary school, there's no, you can just do science for fun. You don't have to do science and go and be a scientist. You can just do it for fun. I certainly didn't get any of that when I went to school. I don't know if it's been different for anyone else.
I did science clubs at primary school. There was certainly an element of that. I loved my primary school, and my science teacher was brilliant. I think she's one of the reasons that I stayed in science. But we had, at the end of every term, there was a challenge, and it would be, like dropping an egg off a roof or something, and there'd be a science element, but there'd also be an arts element, and it would all sort of come together. And I think that sort of thing can be really, really beneficial, but it takes time and effort, and schools don't all have the resources and the time to do that, unfortunately.
Well, there's a major philosophical problem here in many countries in the world, that the majority of countries in the Western world see education not as a valuable investment in the future of the next generation and of the country's income and long-term prospects, but rather an intolerable burden upon the society. And so we've had this shift where we now find, and this data comes out of the people who build private prisons in America, and they're finding that the best way to predict how many prison cells they'll need in 1 decade is the illiteracy level among the 10 and 11-year-old children. So by not doing education, we're setting ourselves up for expensive prisons where it would be cheaper to put them up in a 5-star hotel and pay all of their education fees than to put them in a jail. Jail is more expensive than education. Go figure.
Yeah, I mean, again, I keep thinking any money spent on teachers is money. I mean, same argument applies to nursing and loads of other things, obviously, but key money spent on good people with good skills doing good stuff at the right time is an investment in the future.
So in, let's say 10 minutes, how do we fix it? Matt, you can go first.
Double the salary of all maths and science teachers. I mean, it's really, I mean, I go on and on about enthusiastic teachers, but I mean, a lot of very well-meaning biology and PE teachers are forced to teach, well, no, they volunteer to teach maths lessons because they know it's important, but if you haven't got the depth of subject, it's hard to bring it alive. And what you're saying, I mean, I'm almost indifferent to curriculum because you need the curriculum, but it doesn't change dramatically, and any teacher that knows what they're doing with any curriculum will end up doing a good job. But it's giving them one day, a fortnight, or a certain amount of freedom to do the things that you can't encapsulate in a curriculum, which is the critical thinking, the logic skills, and all of that. And for that, you need teachers who are keen and enthusiastic to do it.
And I think it's not just paying them more, but it's giving them more time. Because if I'm developing a show, I've put weeks of time into that hour-long content. If I was a teacher and I was having to work up, I don't know, like 10 new lessons a week, there's no way I could put so much time and thought into how to link it back to real life and how to put demos in and make it engaging. There's not time. And all my friends I know who are teachers, they're exhausted. They're working so hard. They could do what I do, but they just don't have the time and the support and the resources.
So is that where, because I don't imagine this government's going to give much more money to education, they've got other things to spend their time doing. Is that where it falls on us and everyone to do more, I guess, science outreach to try and get kids to do anything with science, critical thinking, whatever that may be?
Yes, I think it's interesting how this talking about kids has become talking about kids in school. And in my head, I'm just like, yeah, but kids only spend like a fraction of their time in school. And part of my goal in life is to bring science more into pop culture. And so, like, you don't have to teach kids about pop music for them to know about, I don't know, One Direction or 21 Pilots or whoever else you want. I am totally alienating this audience. And you don't have to tell little kids, oh, you have to learn about Monet or Rembrandt in order to draw a hand painting that gets stuck on the fridge. And yet with science, it seems that people are like, oh, well, science is an academic subject, and therefore we shall leave it to the teachers, and that will be it. And I'd love it if science was seen as another form of entertainment. And so you get entertainment in the form of sport, in the form of music, in the form of art and literature. Why not just in the form of science? And then it gives teachers a bit of a break because they are not the only source of science for kids. And it just gives everyone a bit of a more rounded thing because outside of school, you don't have to focus on making sure that they know all their ABCs of science. You can just go, hey, there's this really cool thing that you could do with this goopy stuff. Why don't you try it? And then also it will take the pressure off parents and the people bringing up these kids because they won't have to think, oh, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a science teacher, I can't teach my kids this. You're just like, oh, we're gonna when I was growing up, it was like, here's a load of bottles in the bath. Learn about volumes. and that was science, but it was just something that we did.
Yeah, there's an everyday element to it. I think a lot of what you do is people assume that science is science classroom, science whatever, and then the questions you get will be the science of quite literally anything and everything.
Well, I do get very different questions. Are there any children here? No, good, okay. I get different questions from different audiences, and possibly one of the deepest questions, which showed a whole lot of science involvement by the person herself. And this is on record on the ABC, and it was part of their advertising campaign recently, when a woman rang me up, and she did a science experiment herself, and she said, whenever I have oral sex with my husband and his penis hits the back of my throat, I go temporarily deaf. I noticed because I was playing some music. And I got all my girlfriends to do the same thing and have sex with their husbands, and they noticed they went deaf at the same time. Why?
And we should be teaching this in schools, just to make that very clear.
And the answer was fairly straightforward, of course. But the point was that she had this sense of curiosity about the world. And so one thing I've noticed in the schools is that the students are curious in primary school. And they're not scared of asking any question they like. But when they get to high school, suddenly it's, I can't be too cool. I've got to be cool. And if I don't know something, that proves I don't know everything. So therefore I won't ask a question. They just keep themselves very quiet all the time. And they will not ask questions. And so I've made a point in Australia of firstly doing Q&A sessions everywhere I can around the world. I do 2 of them every week. I've done some here in England, and whenever it's a government school, I send them out at my own expense $300 worth of my books to put in their library, and I've done it with 2 schools here in England. And I've made a point of going to the worst schools in each state of Australia, where the pass mark from entering high school to leaving is the lowest, where you have the maximum number of kids dropping out. And it seems to be related to a whole bunch of issues, that none of which we can fix on the run. But on one hand, you can talk about the little things that we can do, but on the other hand, we need high-level action. And I mean higher than the Secretary of State for Education, Justine Greening, and higher than the Prime Minister. I mean, higher than the Queen. I mean, right to the top. I mean, to Rupert Murdoch. We take it right to the people who really run this country, and we change the philosophy of how we're doing the education. Because part of the problem is that on one hand we're not educating in the true sense of the word, E meaning out, duco, ducare, to lead. And I remember reading an autobiography of a famous music producer who turned up in the first day of high school in the USA, and his teacher said, I want you all to write an essay about what you did in the holiday breaks between primary school and high school, except for you, pointing at this kid, saying, I want you to write something about music, because he'd been tapping his fingers. And he suddenly realised that he loved music, and she drew his natural skill out of him. Right, that's one side of it. The other side of it is the money side. If you give a cat, I learned this in Texas, if you give a cat $100, you don't get a lion. You've just got a wealthy cat. If you give I love Texas. I got to fire an AK-47 and an AR-15, and next time they're promising me a small tactical nuclear device, I go back. And the other thing was that in the school system, what we're doing is we're trying to train only the top percentage of them. So getting back to the other point, though, about the teachers, they need to be paid more. I reckon doubling the salary, and they need to have a master's degree in their field that they're teaching, such as mathematics, so they don't turn up and say, I'm just a facilitator, and a master's degree in education. And Brian Schmidt, the recent Nobel Prize winner, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering dark energy, 70% of the universe, he was being taught at a time in Alaska where they had lots of money, and so from the oil, and so all the teachers had 2 master's degrees, one in their own field, and every teacher in every school was brilliant, and they had a whole generation of really smart people come out of Alaska at that time. You fertilise the soil, the goodness come out. Second point, part of our education system is geared to us, the top 5%. What about the other 85%? So I like the system that they have. Hey, Matt, you're a bit slow there. So what about the system where they have in some of the Scandinavian countries, where everybody does the same course until the last couple of years, and then they split into the trades and academic. And if you do not have plumbers, you do not have a civilization. The third one, who touched on that point about just having science for fun? Yeah, that was brilliant. 3M, I like 3M as a company because they make good products, and the way they treat their scientists, and they do what they call legal bootlegging, which fits in exactly what you said. Legal bootlegging is that every scientist, technician, technical officer is allowed to do anything they want every Wednesday afternoon. From lunch to the end of the Wednesday, they can do anything they want with 3M equipment and 3M money and 3M resources. On 3M's time, they can do anything they want, but the rights belong to 3M. And 52% of 3M's income comes from that 17% of time. And so the concept of just putting aside a time of the week where it's not going to be examined, this is just fun, it's only 17% of the whole week, party. Okay, that's my bit.
There was something, I don't remember where, Matt and I were doing some maths films, and there was a company that we went to that did the same thing, like Friday afternoon, all the mathematicians.
I know
just
Google
basically
does that as well.
Yeah, Google famously have their 10% time, and that's where Google Maps came out of a guy in Australia at the Google headquarters there. Did Google Maps, and phenomenal. We were at Auto Trader.
That was it.
Where they've been around for a very long time. As a company, they've regressed into being a startup. It's ridiculous. And so they've got like fake lawn on the walls and that kind of stuff. But I had a meeting in a camper van, and so they do the same thing. They give their people loads of time to play around and still keep their love of for a lot of them, it's data scientists and people analysing data, to still enjoy their nerdy pursuits. And we need to, it's as true for kids as it is for adults. The playing with it is key.
I think what is actually really positive that's kind of building at the moment is the maker movement, that there are people who are creating spaces where kids and adults can go and play and build stuff and code and all of those sorts of things. So I think that's probably something that's really positive that is happening at the moment that hopefully might make a difference.
We've also got to be the flip side of this, and I'm going to go to someone in the audience in a minute, is that we get everyone so excited about science that when they get to the end of high school science, they go, brilliant, I know all the science, now I'm off to university. They get there on day one and go, oh shit, this is quite hard. So I was talking to Simon, can you get a microphone over to Simon, please, about this the other day, that when kids get out of high school, do they actually know the core science to then go on and do anything with it?
I suppose I disagree with three of the points that have just been raised. One is that Sally was saying, schools, kids are only at school for a short amount of time. They're there for the majority of their time. And so I really, really feel that that's where this needs to be happening, and that's where the responsibility needs to be. We can't rely on my parents or many other parents or pop culture or anything else. It'd be very nice, but it's not going to happen. And then the title, I think, is about inspiring or engaging children. And I think that there's more inspiration and there's more material, fantastic YouTube videos, fantastic programs, fantastic material, books, etc., than ever before. We're inspiring people more than ever before. More than half of the kids doing A-level are doing maths A-level. In a way, we don't need more people doing maths.
Hey, it's getting a very crowded market space, frankly.
But the problem is, and then Dr. Karl, I don't know about the comparison between Australia and the UK. But you were saying we need to concentrate on the 85%. But my feeling is that in the UK for the last 3 decades, the focus has been on the 85%, that we need to make people more scientifically literate, that we need people to be more numerate. And that has to be a very, very good thing. But I think where we fail dismally is that if you're in that top 5, 10, 15%, the GCSE just doesn't stretch you. It's a doddle if you're in that top 5%. And so we inspire kids, and I've been guilty of it for 20 years, saying maths is wonderful, maths is great, go and do maths. And they go back to their classroom, and they're not being stretched. And so they get their A star, and they think they're good at maths. And the truth is, they don't know if they're good at maths because they've never been stretched. So at the moment, that's what I'm really focusing my efforts on, is not inspiring kids, but saying, if you leave primary school being numerate and confident and ambitious, then we're going to stretch you. We're going to put you on a different path. And I think that works really well in terms of getting more girls and minorities into mathsy subjects, because what we're saying is, if you have that interest at the age of 12 or 13, we're going to nurture it and we're going to help it flourish. And that's why I think we've just ignored things for the last 20, 30 years.
Who wants to take that?
That is the most obvious audience plant I've seen in my life.
Brian Cox, what do you... Anyone?
I think there's a very interesting point about all the stuff we do on YouTube and all the bonus stuff, which is great for, a whole generation of nerdy kids who would have felt quite isolated and bullied at school suddenly have an online community and things they can tap into. But all of this stuff is very opt-in. And the power of things we do in school is, that's where we're going to get the kids who don't have parents who are into this, who don't have any other motivation to look into these things until someone says, hey, write an essay about this, I think you'll enjoy it. And so I think that for all and culture is hugely important to, so parents are more supportive, but, we actually have the kids locked at school for approximately a third of their life while they're in the right age category. And so I think that's, it's important to use that.
Is that we're falling down then in the way schooling is set up, or like you said, that teachers just don't have the tools to do it? Or the money?
I think everyone else would have very important things to say on this as well. I think it's a difficult one because one of the reasons why I think we're failing the very top 5% is, and I'm going to go on and on about how we've got a lack of enthusiastic teachers. A lot of what teachers do is very controlled and prescribed because it's a system designed that anyone can be an average teacher. And the reason we lose track of the top 5% is they're going to be fine. And so teachers can just let them be, and they'll be bored, but they probably won't set the classroom on fire, and they will end up going to university, and then that will sort them out. And so I think it's a huge injustice that we don't do anything for them. But a lot of our education system is currently geared at being averagely good for everyone, and I think that is we shouldn't settle for that.
There's a lot of talk though about failing kids, and I'm just wondering what you mean when you say you're failing kids. What is a success? What are we trying to get from their science education? What do we see as important? Is it that we're making sure that for those that want to be scientists, they're not going in disillusioned thinking that they're going to be great at it? Is it that they just are more critical of the world around them? Is it just that they are aware that it exists and it brings them enjoyment? Like, what are we talking about here?
I guess part of it is to firstly realise, which some people never do, that science is not just a bunch of facts, but a way of looking at the world. And my latest problem, which I can't solve with all the clever people in physics, is when I'm drying the towels on the clothesline on a day when there's not a lot of sunlight left, should I have the towels this away or that away? Because this way I get more of a concentration gradient, and then that will then follow Newton's law of faster evaporation. But in going across the other way, there's the evaporative effect, and I can't solve that. And so I see science as something that we do in always, like for example, you cook some onions, and do you throw a lot of heat in over a short period of time, or the same amount of heat over a longer period of time? So I've been trying to bring up my children that way, and also just to answer their questions. But sometimes they don't ask questions.
It always really annoys me when I'm watching MasterChef or something. They're trying to evaporate a sauce, and they're going, "It's just not reducing quickly enough." And I'm like, "Put it in 2 pans."
Just calculate the volume to surface area.
So the problem is that MasterChef is suffering because of our education.
Exactly. They'd be making better sauces if they knew basic science. No, but it's a really good point, that science isn't just what happens in a classroom or what happens in a lab. It's everything. The world is made of science. And little children kind of understand that, because when they're learning about the world, they experiment. I mean, anyone who's been around small children knows that they like to drop things and then wait for mum to pick it up or dad to pick it up and then drop it again. They're learning about gravity, and they're learning about cause and effect. They're learning that if I drop my thing, it will get picked back up. But at some point, we sort of drum that curiosity and that wanting to experiment and learn about the world around out of them somehow. And that's what I think is really important, is to stop this idea of science as being a bunch of facts and think about it as a way of looking at the world, and that it's not finished as well. Because I think the way science is taught in schools, it's often taught as if we know stuff, and these are facts, and science is there and it's done. Whereas my background is psychology and neuroscience, and we know basically nothing about the brain. When you come down to it, basically nothing. We know more about what's out there in the universe than we do what's inside our own heads. But I think that's really exciting. And when I do Q&A sessions at the end of my shows in schools, the answer to most of the questions that I get asked is, no one knows. Here's some interesting related stuff that we do know, but actually the answer to your question, why do we dream? No one has a clue. But I think that's a good thing to be telling kids, that it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say no one knows, and actually they're the ones who are going to find out.
Very difficult to mark that in a test, though. You just write, I don't know.
But The sense of curiosity thing is really good, because if you go into corporate land, they do this wanky thing of having role-building games, and one of them is where they try to work out, for example, the best way to hold up some heavy marshmallows with some incredibly weak, flimsy straws and maybe one little bit of blue tack. And the adults will sit back and think about it and move very slowly, whereas the kids will try everything, and the kids do it before the adults, and they always get it done faster and better, and the adults think it through and don't try different things, and they've lost their sense of curiosity. Like, I can't, if I'm walking down the street and I see somebody doing some welding and the flame is green, my God, I've got to find out why. So that sense of curiosity is what drives me, and what drives children, and some people have it lost at some stage, and I don't know why.
One thing, I don't want to go too deep into this, but one thing also I want to comment on is I think puberty has a lot to blame. Right, because kids are wonderful in primary school and they're jerks by the time they get to middle of secondary school. And I love teenagers, but God, they're idiots. And it's probably one of the worst times in their life to make them go, right, sit down and learn some stuff, right? Because they got a lot going on, right? And it's not a top priority, right? And so just one thing bearing in mind is kids do lose their wonder when they hit high school, and we should do everything we can to keep it. But it's a very complex time for these young people, and we're making our life difficult. But there's no other time to do it, but we are making it difficult by doing formal education.
So you're suggesting a Brave New World system? We just keep children.
I think we should have I think we should have that as a control group.
Yep.
But you've mentioned one thing there, that basically with regard to our high school students, as a result of puberty, they're all going through high school sleep deprived. And the proof was done with regard to rapid eye movements. And when you fall asleep, you're awake, you fall asleep, go down, 1.5 hours later you come up, you go into REM sleep, where your eyes underneath your closed eyelids are going left, right, as though you're watching an invisible tennis match on the outside world. You're seeing that, and you're dreaming, and then down again for another 1.5 hours and repeat. And the thing that happens at puberty is that firstly, their melatonin production is changed so that there's a lot more melatonin made. Secondly, it's produced later. I apologise for the simplicity and errors I've made. Talking to a neuroscience type person, but it's more complicated than that. The upshot is quite clear. They do not get tired until around 11 or 12 o'clock. They're not being evil or wicked, they're just not tired. They used to be tired before, but now they're not. And secondly, they need 10 hours sleep when they finally do get tired. And so the evolutionary advantage of this might have been that the kids of that age would be ideal to guard the tribe during those hours of the night. So what it means is that they're not getting tired until midnight. They need 10 hours sleep, and they wake up at 5 o'clock to go rowing, as my children did. And so if the experiment then with going back to the REM sleep is this: you get some, and this has been done around the world, you get the high school kids and you say, look, we're just going to do this experiment, we've got the approval of your teachers, just go to sleep. And they go to sleep, and they go straight into REM sleep. They don't wait an hour and a half. They're permanently sleep deprived. And it's really convenient to have them going to school early. You can drop them off, the buses are there, the society works. But we're failing in that sense, sorry to use that word, the entire generation of high school students who need their extra sleep. And it's only when they turn into their early 20s and their brains get finally cooked that they'll stop raging till 4 o'clock in the morning.
And there's also, we're learning more and more about the teenage brain and how different it is to children's brains and adults' brains. And there's some really interesting stuff that, again, we're kind of all fighting against, which is that they are desperate for peer approval and they don't really care what adults think about them. And again, that's probably got an evolutionary basis. We can go into all of that. But that's maybe where the popular culture stuff comes in, because actually us adults coming in, or teachers, we can't get across to students the way that their peers can.
The moment a teenager thinks you're trying to impress them, it is all over.
Yeah. Whereas if we can do like a sort of under the radar thing, and one of the kids comes in and goes, I found this really cool thing, I watched a Festival of Spoken Nerd DVD and it was great, and it kind of spreads that way, that actually might be more effective.
After they say, what's a DVD? But yes.
I've seen, we have two hands up
that one's
over
been up for ages.
here. You can just yell, it's really close.
There's someone over here who's had a hand up for ages as well.
Oh, I have a speaker in the way, sorry.
Thank you. Well, all this is extremely interesting. The thing is that I think that we focus too much on targeting the children and not enough in targeting the parents, because most of the studies show that the children that do well academically are the ones who have motivated parents, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean educated parents. My grandparents were primary school teachers in villages that were extremely poor, and all of their students had parents who were themselves illiterate. But because the parents were extremely motivated, they saw education as a way for social mobility for their own children. They motivated their own children. I don't think that it's that difficult to grab children's attention, but unless the parents get involved and realize that science education is really something useful, then I think it's just half measures.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say I completely agree. I think it's really, really difficult to target parents. I don't know about anyone else, but with kids, we do have these captive audiences, and that is the one place where it's quite easy to get people who wouldn't choose to go to a science talk. If you do talks for adults, or if you do talks at festivals, you're always going to get the people who are already engaged. So I think that is one of the hardest challenges we face, is how to get to the disengaged groups not in schools.
Yeah, I think kind of following on from that point, if we have a limited pool of resources to kind of engage kids through whatever means, I worry that if we focus on the parents, that means that we're withdrawing our energies on kids, and then when you're trying to target parents, it's so hard to reach the parents that aren't already like the super enthusiastic ones like you're talking about. And then if you are in the process of trying to target parents, reducing it on the kids, any efforts on the kids themselves, then you're just going to kind of increase any disparity from parents that maybe both parents work and so don't have the time to do it, compared to like your typical affluent middle class parents who are like, oh yes, I can send little Jimmy to extra tutoring or whatever. I just worry that if we rely on parents to do things and not target the kids themselves, that it's going to become easier for some families to slip under the net. Not that it's a bad idea to include parents in this, but that's kind of the little warning bell that's going off in my head.
I think there have been a couple of really successful ways that have done it through kind of other means. So has anyone heard of the Nappy Science Gang? So this was a brilliant citizen science project. I don't know huge amounts about it, but basically a load of parents got together and said, we quite want to use disposable nappies, but we don't know enough about it, enough about the science. Is it unhygienic? What's the best way to wash them? Do we have to boil them because that's really bad for the environment? And they started doing a citizen science project on it, and it's grown, and it's they've just actually released some results and kind of evaluation stuff on it. But they have got people who wouldn't think of themselves as scientists doing science because it's on something that they need to use and that they care about. So there are ways of doing it, but it is difficult, I think.
More. We have questions everywhere. Your choice.
Who's in charge?
Well, I'm interested in everyone's opinion on this, but I'll aim it mathematically because of my background. Sorry. But my experience of going to schools to try and do stuff is that what we target are secondary school kids, which is the, I think, unwritten tone that everyone's talking about, and a lot of your stuff is aimed at that because that's when the cool stuff starts to happen. You know, it's quite hard to engage the 5-year-old with advanced mathematics, but like you've already said, that is an age when they're really curious, and I find that when I'm getting to 14, 15-year-old students talking to them, I'm really preaching to the choir, and I might be converting a few physicists into mathematicians because of the pro maths, but I'm not sure that we as a community are very good at going and giving talks to 5-year-olds, at least in my experience. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Good.
No, it's a very, very good point. And to be honest, I'm not truly going to answer your question. Someone else may be able to. But you're right. As maths and, of course, science, pragmatically, you should talk to whichever age group you are the best at communicating with. And so I've got friends who are very good with primary school kids. I admit we are a bit lacking when it comes to maths and primary schools. There's some good... It's because it's a bit more difficult. There's some good... like maths magic stuff out there some people do. There's some good kind of shapes and building stuff, and I think we need more of it. But for me, I think primary school kids are too easy to excite. Like, you tell them a story about the number 4 and they all get very excited, whereas I enjoy working with jaded teenagers. And I don't think we should be targeting... I mean, there's always an argument for why you should or should not be targeting any given age group. Oh, they've already picked their GCSEs by then. Oh, they've already picked their university by then. They're already... And so I think everyone should go for the age group they'll have the biggest impact on. But I do happily acknowledge, and I'm not at all helping fix this problem, we have a lack of both primary school teachers who are mathematically confident, and we have a lack of maths communicators who are going into primary schools.
Well, when we did Quest for Wonder, we were deliberately aiming at 6 and 7-year-olds, and we find after we've done screenings, the kids will come up and want to ask the puppets a question rather than us. So that involves me then doing a terrible Brian Cox impersonation with a puppet.
How's that go again?
It's for private.
Oh, no, I was waiting for you just to,
But what we found with that is then a lot of the parents they enjoyed the show as well because they're Monkey Cage fans or whatever. But the kids want to come and see the puppets and play with the puppets, and then they run off and go, tell me about the moon, tell me about whatever. So it's very basic level, but at least hopefully they're thinking about something, and then we're probably failing after that with getting them to continue on, but at least that's where we started.
Thanks. So my question would be, do we actually have a problem engaging children in science? Do we have a lack of people who are interested in this subject? I have 3 children. I'm really keen on science and just curiosity in general, and try to nurture that in them. My daughter just rolls her eyes and she says she's just a different person, and we are all different, and we need different types of people in the world. And I think we have the technology, the internet, motivated parents. They are out there, and there's lots of information, lots of interesting information out there. And if you are scientifically minded or interested as a child, I think it's all there for you. So my question is, do we actually have a problem?
I think there is a problem. I think you're right. As we were saying, young children, primary school children, there probably isn't much of a problem. They do all seem to, well, not all of them, but those that are interested are fine with being interested. At some point in secondary school, there becomes a time when it's not cool to be interested, and particularly not cool to be interested in science, and I think it's particularly a problem for girls. And I think that is where the issue comes, and we need to show people that it's okay to stay interested. It's okay to be smart and to be curious. And for me, I think that's where it's really important to have role models and to have the sort of embedding into popular culture so that science isn't seen as something that the weird geeky people do, but it's something that anyone can do.
I think we need to do a good job of promoting science as a way of thinking rather than just going a bit, which doesn't solve Simon's problem of when kids get there, they haven't got the level they need. But I think there's a big gap where kids or teenagers aren't thinking critically, so they're not understanding why climate change matters or why X, Y, Z actually matters.
Don't get me started on girls and science, just don't. But my little anecdata, for what it's worth, I get a lot of people coming up to me saying, oh, I didn't realise science could be this fun. And I think part of that is they think that science is only the facts that they learn in school. And so they go off it. And then it's only later on, if they happen to stumble across a science talk, that they realise, oh, there's this whole other fun, entertaining, interesting, life-fulfilling and enriching side that I'm missing out on. I don't care if they don't want to be scientists, but they're just missing out on just having an enriching life. because they thought that science was this one way that it was in school, and they weren't interested in the way it was in school, fair enough. But that doesn't mean that they should shut it out completely. To me, it'd be like saying, if we only taught kids opera, and then they're like, oh, I didn't really like opera, that's it, no more music for me, forever, for life. How sad would that be? And I think that's one of the problems we have with science, is that if we only teach it in a certain way as the facts, not as a way of thinking, not as just a natural curiosity, then we just risk having a load of people just having a less fulfilling life.
Probably got time for one. Sorry, Carl. No. We've got time for one more.
This is with keeping young people interested. If they're into popular music, popular TV, I think the best way to keep them engaged and excited is to ask them why they like this band. Ask them why they like this TV programme. So do you think I guess the geeky ones aren't interested in the popular culture, and the kids who are popular aren't interested in the geeky culture because they can't find a common ground? Do you think that would be, especially as teenagers, so do you think having that kind of bridge for science communication would be important for everyone and not just for the generation of kids who are naturally curious?
I'm not sure I quite understand that, sorry,
Sorry, it's my bad. I'm just saying that if, even with the subjects that we aren't completely engaged with as adults, for our children, if there's that gap, they like this band, parents like these bands. But if you if you ask the children questions about the things that they like, I think is a good start.
So as in, rather than saying, you should all like Bob Dylan, I cannot believe he's won the Nobel Prize, just saying like, oh, okay, why do you like Little Mix instead? Is that the sort of thing you're saying? And then with science, it would be, okay, so you don't like, I don't know, quantum mechanics. Why do you like maybe this app on your phone or something?
Yeah.
So asking them why they like the science that they do like, and focusing on that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way of kind of just, I think, pointing out to people that the things that they already like are quite scientifically based. And like you were saying, a lot of kids are very good at just like, oh, I like this thing. Oh, it happens to be science, cool. And as they get older, it's like, what? This thing that I like is science? No! So yeah, I do think that focusing on showing them that the things that they already like have a scientific basis can definitely help kind of bridge that gap between this is science and this is fun, and
I think it's
great.
Also really important to show people, everyone, kids, adults, that you can like science and also like Little Mix or popular TV or fashion, or they aren't discrete boxes. You don't have to be, I'm a scientist and a skeptic, therefore I can't like sparkly shoes. That you are allowed to like both. That is okay.
Who are these people that like Little Mix and not Bob Dylan?
Hello.
I would add one bit of warning that the quickest way to get a teenager to stop listening to you is to pretend or express any interest in what they do that they perceive to be not completely genuine. And so I agree completely, because I go, hey, your phone does this, the maths behind this, etc., and that works an absolute treat. But we need to be very careful. The pitfall here is if you go in and they can tell that what you're trying to attach it to is not actually properly linked, and suddenly you're doing a disservice for, in my case, mathematics. I come in, hey, here's some cool maths, also there's a thing on fire. They go, wait a minute, we know that is not directly linked to it. Yeah. The maths must be really boring if you've got to bring in Little Mix or whichever direction things are moving in these days. And they know what you're trying to do, and I think you're doing it's not a criticism of what you said, I'm just saying this is the risk in moving in that
The last
direction.
thing they want to feel is that you're patronising them.
Yeah.
If you patronise a teenager, you've lost them, I think.
Right, we have to finish there because we've run out of time. Thanks everyone for coming. Matt will be in the main room. Lots. You're got to talk tomorrow.
I got to talk tomorrow at 11:10, I think.
You're on at 4 o'clock today and tomorrow. I'm going to go and talk about puppets next door in about 5 minutes. Thank you very much.